Zipper rolls out to the right, pitches off to Taylor, and Taylor's to the 20, down to the 15, down to 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Billy Taylor scored a touchdown from 21 yards out. The crowd goes berserk. It was November 22nd, 1969. That they came to Barry, Michigan, all dressed in maize and blue. The words were said, the prayers were read, and everybody cried. But when they closed the coffin, there was someone else inside. Oh, they came to Barry, Michigan, but Michigan wasn't dead. And when the game was over, it was someone else instead. 11 Michigan Wolverines put on the gloves of gray, and as the organ played the victors, they laid Woody Hayes away. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Who's got it better than us? Nobody!
Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue, and welcome to our game day show for Indiana. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. With us today will be beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. And we'll also hear some of IU coach Curt Cignetti's thoughts on Saturday's game. Let's get started as we always do with my view from Section 17. It's Week 10 and we still don't know what to expect on any Saturday from Team 145. We can be reasonably sure the defense will be stout and keep us in the game. If the offense can build on some of last week's success, we might make a game of it. We don't do one thing in particular well right now, so at this point of the season, in a game like this, maybe we'll throw everything but the kitchen sink at the Hoosiers and go for broke. We have nothing to lose, and we'll need an effort like we haven't seen yet against a team as good as IU. At his Monday presser, IU coach Curt Cignetti had only good things to say about Michigan.
Really tough opponent, obviously won national championship last season. Wasn't much of a game between the two teams last year. And a lot of good players, really stout defense, really good special teams, run the ball well, good tight end, running backs, offensive line functions well, settled in on a quarterback. He can spin it. And the receivers are more than capable. So we'll have to have a great week of preparation and play our best to have a shot.
Cignetti was asked how hard it is to game plan for the Michigan offense, given its lack of success this year.
Offensively, they haven't scored points. They're not in the 40s and 50s. They can run the ball from 11, 12, and 13 personnel. They've got weapons. They've got good backs. They got good players. They're a good football team. Coming in here with a lot of tradition, a lot of history, a lot of pride. That's part of the reason it's on, national TV at 3:30. To meet that challenge, we got to have a great week of preparation.
He was asked what he expects to see from the Michigan defense.
We're still fairly early in our preparation. At this point in the season, you've seen most of what you're going to see. They do present a lot of looks, and they do a great job. He does a great job. He's an excellent coordinator. He coordinated in the NFL a long time. And when you put the tape on, you see, a defense that's very multiple, tries to create problems for offenses, and good players that fly around, play hard, and it all starts up front with them. They're good inside, and they're good on the edge. And they're an aggressive defense.
My guest today says that we are 14-point underdogs for a reason this week. Indiana has been consistent all year and efficient on both sides of the ball. Up next is beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. So stay with us. Joining us on our game day segment this week as we get ready for that game with the Hoosiers on Saturday is beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. Great to have you back with us, Aaron.
Good to be back, Mike.
Well, Aaron, as we get ready for the trip to Bloomington, again for that game with unbeaten Indiana, let's talk about where this Michigan team is right now heading into this weekend. And let's start at quarterback. Davis Warren had his best outing of the year, no doubt about it, against Oregon. And he's looking a lot more comfortable right now, isn't he?
Yeah, he's come along. I think he's obviously gotten some more starts under his belt and more snaps. I think ultimately that's probably what he needed. I don't know if the change earlier in the year necessarily helped his case, benching him and whatnot. But no, he's played relatively well the last couple of weeks. And I think more importantly, for the Michigan offense, he hasn't turned the ball over. We all know how much of an impact the turnovers had on the offense, especially earlier in the year. And while they necessarily didn't beat Oregon on Saturday, he didn't lose it for them either. I mean, he kind of kept them in the game and gave them an opportunity to stay in it and win it. Obviously, they didn't, but no, the play has improved greatly. I think Michigan has done a good job of not asking him to do too much. I remember going into the Michigan State game a few weeks back. Sean Moore told us that he had told Davis, you don't have to be Superman. You don't have to force stuff. You don't have to go out there and try and make a play. Just do what we're asking you to do, and it'll work out. And he did force a couple of things on Saturday, but fortunately for Michigan, it ended up being a touchdown. So he's played relatively well. He's been a mild surprise. I necessarily didn't expect that after he'd been benched, and you didn't know what his psyche was going to be coming back. But he's held up his own relatively well.
Yeah, he really has. And, if it hasn't been one thing, it's been another with this offense so far through the first 9 games. Now the passing game looks like it's, coming along a bit, but the running game seems to be going in the other direction. In main part because that offensive line is now really struggling, aren't they?
Yeah, I think I counted 8 or 9 negative plays on Saturday against Oregon. A bunch of those were in the run game, and yeah, it was due in part largely, I think, to the offensive line. They struggled to block at times. They missed some assignments on some of those, picking up some blitzes at times, and yeah, they've been trying to piece together things. They've been banged up, as we know. Michigan lost Andrew Gentry for the season. A few weeks back, as we all know, they were playing, a redshirt freshman, Evan Link at right tackle, and even some of the more veteran guys you would think wouldn't be so mistake prone, like Josh Preeb and Giovanni El-Hadi. Even Miles Hinton last Saturday had struggled at times. So it's been a struggle all year for that group. They'll put together maybe a good outing one week and then struggle the next. They just haven't. They've lacked the cohesion. I think so many of us have come to expect from this Michigan offensive line. Part of it, I think you can put on the coaching, right? Like it's on the coaching staff to try and gel this group and bring them together. And Michigan has done such a good job of that in the last couple of years, and this year it just hasn't been up to par. And that's probably the big reason for the struggles in the run game. Club Mullins hasn't really rushed for more than 100 yards, I think, the last three games now. Mm-hmm. Donovan Edwards put together some decent runs on Saturday, but again, he didn't have a lot of room to work with either. So, I chalk the run game struggles, at least right now, up to the offensive line, certainly.
Well, I thought in the first 5 weeks, we could hang our hats on that run game. It's what we did best, and when you get to a certain point in the season where you have to feature what you do best. Right now, though, everything this offense does seems labored, and it is something we haven't seen in a long time from a Michigan offense. It's just very hard to watch. There's no continuity.
No, there's not. 1 week the passing game may work and they can't get things going on the ground. Another week the ground game may be working, as we've seen, and they just can't complete a downfield pass. It's been one thing or the other. And then on Saturday specifically against Oregon, they put together a couple of good drives, especially there in the second half, and then the play calling kind of shoot themselves in the foot. So it's one thing or another. It's a sign of just a not good team. It's what it comes down to. Good teams don't do this stuff, and especially this late in the year, and they shot themselves in the foot more times than they can count. And that's one of the reasons why they are what they are. The offense has struggled. It started at the beginning of the year because of the quarterback. Now the quarterback play has improved to the point where you can at least lean on it for help, but at the same token, the run game isn't coming through, and I don't think the coaches are necessarily helping them either with play calling. So it's it's like a game of whack-a-mole, right? One thing pops up, you think you got it figured out, and then another thing pops up. So it's certainly been frustrating to watch. If you're a Michigan fan or just an independent observer trying to take all this in and trying to figure out what the heck's going on.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned play calling, and I'm starting to hear, I know you are, grumbling from fans, even some of the media taking shots about the play calling. And I'm not sure. I try to think about it. Is it fair or not? Based on the personnel Kirk Campbell has to put on the field and basing his game plan on that and his play calling on that, I think it's really, really difficult. But there have been, you're right, some head-scratching calls lately, haven't there?
It seems like there's been a lack of flow and rhythm, and I got that vibe early in the year against, the games against Texas and Arkansas State where, especially, maybe those non-conference games where Michigan still won, but it just didn't look like the years past, right? Where you could lean on that run game and you knew what was coming, but Michigan was so dominant it didn't matter. But it's a good point you bring up, right? Like you wonder how much blame you can put on Kirk Campbell given the personnel that he's been given, right? Like we've seen the receivers have struggled this year to gain separation and get open and everything else. And it's hard to call play call a reliable one when you don't know if the receiver's going to be able to, complete the catch. So, and then you look at things, you look at the tight end situation, like Cole Snelvin and Martin McCline. I think they've done a very good job of scheming those two guys open. Well, if you can scheme those guys open, you can't do the receivers. Is that on the play calling or is that on the personnel you're working with? So it's a good question to be asked. I do think there's criticism there warranted. I think there's no doubt about it. But I'll say this, Sharon hasn't gotten off Kirk. He's still, as far as we know, still the play caller. Sharon has no intention of changing, at least right now. Perhaps something changes in the offseason, but right now they're riding with what they have.
Well, right. It is what it is. And I think the reality for this offense the rest of the way, which is 3 weeks, is that they're just going to have to find something that works each week and ride it during games. I've said this all year. Every week is an adventure. They just have not had an identity all season. And you know what? We're in week 10, and I don't see anything changing in the next 3 weeks. Do you?
No. You are what you are at this point. I don't think you can develop an identity this late in the year. I mean, if you can't, if you're not doing something well at this point, then I don't think you're going to do it well, especially with two top 10 teams coming up. I think this is the point in the year where I think Michigan's going to have to probably throw everything in the kitchen sink at Indiana and Ohio State just to try and be competitive and try to hopefully win these games. And obviously it doesn't, it flies in the face of what we were just talking about in the play calling and trying to develop some rhythm or continuity. Because at this point, it's almost desperation mode, right? You not only want to try and gain bowl eligibility, but you do want to try and pull off an upset to give the fan base something positive to look toward, and try and give yourself some momentum going in the off season, because as you point out astutely, there is no identity from the Michigan offense. And we thought we were going to see one early in the year when the run game was clicking for a while, but as you pointed out, things fell off with the protections up front, and things have changed since. So it's been a baffling year. I don't think many of us, especially covering this team or just watching this team, expected this type of drop off with the offense. I think we all expected some drop off, but not to this level. It's been really stunning, to be honest with you.
Well, even Wink Martindale is not exempt from taking heat from some quarters of the media and fan base. But, last week he played without his two starting corners. And, of course, Will Johnson, arguably the best corner in college football, was among those two. But overall, against the number one team in the country, and I'm convinced they really are the best team in the country, they were pretty darn good, especially in the second half, weren't they?
Yeah, they adjusted well, and that's kind of been a theme with this Michigan defense under Wink Martindale. They typically have a bad quarter and a half, and then they figure it out. And that was certainly the case Saturday, right? Oregon goes down and scores touchdowns on 4 of their first 5 drives. You think, oh boy, this Michigan defense is struggling. They can't get off the field and everything else, and then they come out in the second half and they force a 3 and out. They get a stop in the second drive. Unfortunately, it was extended due to that penalty on the illegal formation on the punt attempt. But yeah, Wink's adjusted well. I don't think he gets enough credit for that. And I think that obviously Wink goes back to his experience and he does know what he's doing. But just either the slow starts, the big plays, and the quarters, quarter and a half of mistakes that they've just piled up this year, and it hasn't been enough to maybe overcompensate for the struggles Michigan's had offensively. Coming into the year, we thought this defense would carry the day, and in some games it has, but it hasn't been good enough help help Michigan win some of these games, and it's been unfortunate.
Yeah, and one of the things I tell fans I talk to is, you have to keep in mind this defense has been on the field way too much this year because of the offensive struggles, and they do not have the depth that we did last year. There's just no question about it, and then you add the injuries into that. But I still think their body of work, all things considered, they've played pretty darn well enough to win more than 5 games.
No doubt about it, and I'm glad you brought that up because so much of Michigan the last few years' success was relying on that complementary style of play, right? The defense get off the field and give the offense the ball. The offense would have those long, time-consuming drives that whittle time off the clock and keep the defense fresh. And they had the depth too. I mean, they were unafraid of rotating guys in. They felt like they were 4 deep at the end. They had multiple guys up front. I think they felt good coming into this year about the depth in the secondary. That clearly hasn't really held up. And as you pointed out, going into a game against the number 1 team in the country without Will Johnson and Jair Hill, your 2 best starting quarterbacks, doesn't help either. So they're in an interesting situation. They've been put in a bad situation, and all things considered, I do think they've held up relatively well.
Well, this Saturday we, as we know, head to Bloomington, and I've seen enough of Indiana to believe this is a really good football team. And you talk about complementary football; they're playing it. Curt Cignetti has done one heck of a job with this team, hasn't he?
Yeah, I think it's another testament of what you can do and how quickly you can flip a roster if you know what you're doing and you're able to get a bunch of guys to the transfer portal like he has. It's been impressive. Not only obviously the offense is fun to watch and they're explosive and everything else, but maybe more impressively, I mean, he's flipped his defense. The defense is elite. I mean, they get pressure on the quarterback. They can hang in man coverage in the secondary. They're a fun group to watch. I remember flipping the TV on week 1 and week 2, watching them play, and it was against lesser competition, I think like Western Carolina and Florida International. But you got a sense that this team knew its identity early on. They were able to move down the field rather easily. They're explosive and fun to watch, and I knew they'd be at that point. I had a good idea they'd be a force in the Big Ten, but I didn't know they'd be 9-0 at this point. It was pretty wild. It's been pretty wild. They beat up on the bottom, the middle level of the Big Ten, and I'm curious to see how they handle Michigan. I mean, they're I think a rightful 14-point favorite at this point. And Michigan's going to have its handful, I think, going into Bloomington on Saturday.
Well, the IU offense is very balanced and led, of course, by transfer quarterback Curtis Rourke. I mean, you watch this kid. He is very patient in the pocket, has a big arm, has great protection, and he makes really good reads. He's just really an impressive quarterback to watch. He's one of those kids I've seen enough this year to say, man, where did he come from?
Yeah, he was a good identification from Cignetti. He was a MAC Player of the Year a couple of years ago. Yeah. Piled up a ton of stats, at Ohio. And again, a guy who was given an opportunity because of the transfer portal to move up and do it at this stage. You do wonder when you get guys like that, whether they can translate to the big level. I think given the way Indiana plays offensively, the weapons he has around him, it's magnified his play, and he's played fantastic. I mean, his turnover to interception ratios, I think something like 19-3 or something like that. I mean, it's been impressive. He doesn't turn the ball over. He's a high completion rate. He doesn't make a ton of mistakes. And it's a big reason why Indiana is where it is. Talent identification is so key nowadays, especially when you're relying on the transfer portal like Curt Cignetti did. He's got that offense whipping around. They're incredibly fun to watch, and it's going to be difficult for Michigan on Saturday, I think, to handle.
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult because they're an offense that seems to smell your weaknesses and go right after them. And I'm sure Wink has a good idea of what he wants to do schematically against IU on paper. But if we're short at the corners again this week, that is really going to stress the defense out, isn't it?
Yeah. I think Michigan's hopeful that Jair Hill does come back, so that will give them some area to breathe there. But again, potentially not having Will Johnson, will be a big deal because an offense like this that wants to get the ball out quick and deliver explosive plays and has an offensive line that so far has held up. You wonder how much pressure Michigan's going to be able to generate. We were able to get much on Dylan Gabriel Saturday because he got the ball out so quickly. And Oregon's offensive line is pretty good too. So it's going to fall back largely on the linebackers and the secondary on Saturday, whether they can stick with their men, stick with their guys, tackle in space and try and limit some of those big explosive plays that Indiana likes to lean on. So yeah, ideally you want both back. I don't know if that's going to happen, but it certainly sounds like Jair Hill, they expect him at least to be available.
Well, if anything's going to help the defenses, it will be if the offense can get it together, which we haven't seen yet this year. So what they'll be able to do against that IU defense is going to be really really interesting, because they are fast, they're aggressive, they can cover in the secondary. They are really playing, when you watch them, at a very high level on that side of the ball, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. They get to the quarterback. They make plays in the secondary. It's as I said, it's almost been more impressive than the offense, I think. And that's a big reason why Indiana's 9-0. They're a complete team. Michigan's going to have to try and complete some plays early. It wouldn't shock me at all if they take to the air earlier than normal. I think just given the way Davis Warden's been playing and the issues with the run game, and the fact that I think you need to get the offensive momentum going. And slow start to play this Michigan offense now for a few weeks. And I don't think you want to do that on Saturday. If you get behind by a touchdown or two against Indiana, I find it hard to believe, much like many of these other opponents, Michigan will have a hard time coming back. So I think a crucial first drive or two, I think is going to be key on Saturday, just to give them a shot to keep themselves in the game. Because the last thing you want to do is go into that environment, which is expected to be a sellout. Indiana's obviously very high and happy about what things are at the football program. Last thing you want to do is get into a hole early.
Well, as we know, anything can happen in college football, but if we're being honest, Michigan's keys to victory are, defensively shutting down or containing Indiana, which is a big ask. Forcing, turnovers will be key. Michigan has to play complementary football if they want to have a chance in this game. But you know what? That's something we haven't seen all year, is it?
No, we haven't. And you hit all the keys, and that seems that's the bread and butter. That's how Michigan wants to play ideally, and they just haven't been able to do it this year. So, if you can force a turnover or two, you can get a couple of good drives early. Michigan's feeling good about themselves. They'll have a shot. But I do think that 14-point spread is probably about right. Indiana just has so much firepower, and they're so good. And I think at this point, they in a way become kind of battle tested, right? They're so confident. They believe they can go in and beat anybody at this point. The coach, Kurt Cignetti's got his team feeling great about themselves. So there's no reason why, Indiana shouldn't win on Saturday. They probably will. But if you're Michigan, look, you're going in there and trying to muck it up. You're trying to do to catch them off guard. It wouldn't shock me at all if they throw everything from a play calling perspective at them and try and get Indiana off balance. It's going to be a tough slog. I'm really curious to see how Michigan comes out, because if they start slow again, it could be a long afternoon.
Very long. Well, final question before I let you get away, Aaron. Michigan needs 6 wins to get bowl eligible. 3 games left. Northwestern, probably the only beatable team on the schedule. And we all know this has been a drop-off that we didn't expect. But we have to also start looking to the future while finishing in the present. At least the bowl game gets you more practices, and that means a lot of young players will get more opportunities. That is very important for Sharon in planning for the future, isn't it?
It is. It's an understated goal of making a bowl game. I know the fans won't be necessarily excited if Michigan ends up playing in the Pinstripe Bowl or the Duke's Mayo Bowl or whatever. But you're right. It helps the coaches kind of get an idea of what they have moving forward. You can expect a lot of the NFL draft prospects and some of the guys you want returning next year to probably sit it out. There'd be no need for them to play, but you can get a better look at some of the guys returning next year. Some of the guys potentially, in the two deep, and maybe some of the true freshmen that haven't played a ton, to give you a better idea of where things stand moving forward. It wouldn't shock me at all if Michigan were to roll out their Jaden Davis at quarterback potentially as well. Nowadays those lower level bowls are kind of treated as exhibitions, rightfully so, but I think internally they're used as measuring sticks in a way. They get 15 additional practices, so that helps with development as well. It just gives you a better idea of where you think things are stand heading in the off season and what you might need in the transfer portal and obviously the recruiting class. Yeah,
going to be an interesting final stretch, 3 weeks, starting Saturday against a very good Indiana team, so we shall see what happens. With us today has been beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. Aaron, always a pleasure having you on the show, and we look forward to another visit soon.
Thanks, Mike.
On Quick Hits today, as far as injury news goes, we're hopeful Jair Hill will be ready this week, but Will Johnson is doubtful. Other than that, we're in good shape. Here are a few game day notes of interest for Saturday. Michigan has dominated this series all time with 62 wins against 10 losses. The first meeting was in Ann Arbor on November 3rd of 1900, a 12-0 Michigan win. Last year, the game was played in Ann Arbor on October 14th. Michigan rolled to a 52-7 win. Head coach Curt Cignetti is in his first year in Bloomington and has a perfect 9-0 record. In 14 years as a head coach, his record is an impressive 128-35. Last year, the Hoosiers were 3-9 overall, 1-8 in Big Ten play. Their last bowl appearance was in the 2020 Outback Bowl, where they lost to Ole Miss 26-20. No Indiana team has ever started the season 9-0. The weatherman says we might have some rain to deal with during the game, off and on showers. Temps will be very nice for early November, in the low 60s at game time. Winds will be light. The game kicks off at 3:30 p.m. Eastern and will be televised by CBS with Brad Nessler and Gary Danielson up in the booth. It should be quite the atmosphere in Bloomington on Saturday. IU is the real deal and they are hungry. Their history with Michigan is lopsided and they are playing for a lot right now. They are in the Big Ten race with 3 games left and ranked number 8 in the college football playoff standings, which were released this week. This is a huge game for IU and their fan base for all of those reasons. Michigan will have to show us an effort we haven't seen yet this year if we hope to put ourselves in a position to spring the upset. Next week, we have another bye before the final 2 games. We hope to have Isaiah Hole from Wolverines Wire with us and get his thoughts on what the final 2 weeks of the season hold for this team. So make sure you join us. That does it for now, though. Have a great Wolverine weekend, everyone. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Think upset, beat Indiana. Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!